the radical, fundamental principles of freedom, rational self-interest, and individual rights. This is the Yaron Brook Show.
All right, everybody, welcome to Yaron Brook Show on this, what day is it? It's Wednesday afternoon here in beautiful Southern California. Thanks, everybody, for joining me. And, we've got a lot to talk about today. There's a lot going on in the world, actually in the United States primarily. I'm sure there's a lot going on elsewhere, but not following it that much. Thanks for joining me. I know you've got other things you could be doing. Of course, not basketball. The basketball playoffs that are supposed to be being on right now. The basketball playoffs have been postponed because of the players won't play because of what is going on in protest for Kenosha. My team, the Boston Celtics, has a game tomorrow. Start the second round of the playoffs against Toronto, and there's talk about that being postponed as well. So even sports is being politicized. Even sports is used as protest. I guess to some extent it always has been. And sports fans suffering a little bit. I wouldn't put it in the same category as the suffering going on elsewhere around the country. Conventions are still going on. The Republican convention is on, I think, the third night tonight. Mike Pence is going to be talking tonight, so be sure to tune in or not to tune in or whatever you guys do. I don't listen to these things. All the political propaganda of these conventions is pretty dull and boring and uninteresting. So I try to ignore it. Somebody says my California room looks exactly like my Puerto Rican room. It shows ignorance. Man, doesn't look anything like it. All right, no ceiling fan in Puerto Rico, no white walls in Puerto Rico. Everything's different. Conventions, we did the convention last week, the Democratic convention. We'll get to the Republican convention. A theme is coming across from these conventions. You're seeing a clear theme. The Democrats are running on a anti-Trump theme. The whole theme of the convention is anti-Trump. The Democrats will emphasize coronavirus, death of coronavirus, disaster of coronavirus, blame it on Trump as much as they can, and of course run on Trump, on a anti-Trump campaign. Almost nothing positive to offer. There's no real plans. They're not going to emphasize the plans. They'll throw some red meat to the progressive wings. They'll throw some red meat to their voters. They'll, talk about climate change. They'll talk about a Green New Deal. But they're not. That's not going to be the focus of the election from the Democratic side. They're going to be as silent as they can about specifics about their plans with regard to the economy, with regard to everything else. People are quite suspicious about Democrats when it comes to all of that. Republicans, from the first 2 days of this convention, Republicans are going to run on an anti-democratic platform. They're not going to run pro-Trump, anti-democratic, but mainly anti-democratic. They're going to run on the riots. They're going to run on, do you want Democrats to sanction the kind of behavior that's going on right now? They're going to run on the fear of socialism. They're going to run on real fear of Democrats. I mean, you will see the fear of rising crime rates. Of course, Trump is president, and we're getting rising crime rates. He was supposed to be able to cure this, but this is going to be a political season. They always are negative, but this more than ever, I think, is going to be a negative campaign. Democrats will run as anti-Trump as they can. Republicans will run as anti-Democrats as they can. And that's all you'll have. There'll be very little positive agenda, very little positive discussion of issues, of philosophies, of ideas, of projects, of principles, because the fact is neither side has principles and the ideas are stale, the ideas are boring, the ideas aren't interesting, and nobody indeed is voting in this election for anything. Almost all the votes this election are going to be anti-something. Even the pro-Trump people claim they're not really pro-Trump. Nobody actually says they really like Trump. They all say, "Oh no, he's better than Hillary. He's better than Biden." So, and we're going to see that played too. So this is going to be an election, super negative election, focused primarily on fear and on trying to rile up people emotionally against the other side. And both sides have plenty to do. We'll see the Democrats emphasizing COVID, Republicans, as they have in this convention, almost never mentioning COVID and emphasizing riots and demonstrations and law and order and so on. I mean, if Biden wanted a slam, a slam dunk, a home run for this election, Biden would tomorrow come out in a law and order speech. He would come out clearly anti-riots. He would come out pro-law enforcement. He would come out with a speech that basically, encouraged cities and states to clamp down on the riots, pro-demonstrations, anti-riots, but in a significant way. And I think if he did that, he would win the election. And I think if he doesn't do that, which I don't think he will, there's a good chance he loses. I think it's becoming more and more likely that Trump wins, primarily because of the riots we're seeing. So, if we're talking about riots, let's talk about what's going on in I don't know how do you pronounce it? Kenosha? Yeah, okay. We'll say Kenosha. If somebody thinks I'm mispronouncing it, they'll let me know. I mispronounce pretty much everything. Anyway, so Kenosha. All right. So I don't know if you guys have seen the footage from the shooting in Kenosha, but from what we've seen, it's pretty horrific. Of course, as more details come out, who knows what we'll discover. But it really does appear that a policeman, basically at point blank, shot as it turns out, a black man several times in the back. And, it's horrific. It's horrific. Okay, so saying the way to pronounce it is Kenosha. All right, I think I've got it. All right. So I know we got some super chat questions, a couple from Jason, and he's putting $20 in, so that's always good because that's a significant amount. So that is great. But we're gonna have to wait. I really want to get through the topic before we get to the questions. Otherwise, I'll never get that started. Kenosha. It really is horrific that a policeman would do this. Again, this goes back to what I've been saying from when we saw the Floyd murder. Police need significantly better training. They need to be better equipped to deal with situations, to defend themselves, and to pacify the person they're trying to arrest or that they're dealing with. They have to find ways to de-escalate situations, not to escalate them. They need to find ways to use guns and deadly force as truly a last resort. They need self-defense training. They need, something. Martial arts. We need real police reform. We need really to think about what is the role of police in our society and how do we protect ourselves from the police, and how do we give the police training so that they can protect themselves while not being a danger to all of us. These are public servants with guns. Public servants with guns. And that's very dangerous if there's a rogue policeman, but also very dangerous if they're not given the proper training to deal with situations, and therefore they revert out of fear to using that gun. I mean, it really does seem like, in some cases the police are shooting people more often than maybe we shot people in war zones in Iraq. The rules of engagement for the military seems like in some ways are harsher than the rules of engagement for the police, which is truly horrible. So all of us should be worried about that. All of us should be worried about a policeman with a gun who doesn't know how to handle a violent situation. Somebody says they should learn Krav Maga. Maybe Krav Maga is the right. Krav Maga is the Israeli Special Forces martial art, but I'm not sure that's the right one because Krav Maga is really focused on killing, not on pacifying. But there's got to be, and there are, martial arts that are focused on pacifying, that are focused on neutralizing the person you're trying to neutralize without killing them in a way that allows you to control the situation. And my view is every single policeman, and I know this is expensive. This is why defunding the police is insane. It's expensive. Police need this. It is truly insanity that this is what happens with our police today. And we keep seeing these kind of videos. We saw it to some extent in Atlanta, although in Atlanta there was more justification to shoot. We certainly saw it with George Floyd. We saw it now in Kenosha. Shaw, right? And yet, nobody is talking about real police reform. Somebody said they'd love to see Iran neutralize George Floyd using strength alone. I can't. I'm not trained to do it. I haven't volunteered to do it, and I couldn't do it. But that's why you're talking about police. Police shouldn't be just me. Police should be in shape. Police should be well trained. Police should be able to neutralize a person without use of deadly force. I didn't volunteer for the police. I don't have the training, but I know a number of people who with jiu-jitsu or with judo or some other martial art could probably have neutralized George Floyd without killing him. Without killing him. He was unarmed. He didn't know martial arts. He was not going to kill the policeman. Now, this guy, this cop in Kenosha, shot him point blank in the back. Now, I don't know if he panicked. I don't know if he was fearful. I don't know if he was angry. I don't know if he's just a nut. I don't know what exactly happened. But there's got to be a better way to deal with this than to shoot people point blank in the back. And that's what a jury's for. We got to prosecute the guy, right? Somebody says, Ryan says, that's what a jury's for. But more importantly, somebody says that means no women in the police. That's just not true. Just not true. Women can be quite strong. And again, with the right training, you can neutralize people. There are holds. There are ways to cause pain to people, even people significantly larger than you, significantly bigger than you. There are ways to cause pain to them, to subdue them quickly, effectively. A woman could knock you out, knock you down, subdue you without any problem, even when you're high on drugs. So, you don't have to stand on somebody's throat for 9 minutes to subdue them. Maybe he was reaching into a car. Again, shoot him 9 times. Shoot him in the back. Is there no, really? You think there's no other way to pacify somebody? Is that what you really want the police to be doing? Somebody says police learn to kneel and neck from Israeli police forces. Is that supposed to justify it? Are the Israeli police forces the standard for the world? And did the Israeli police force do it for 9 minutes? Did they do it for longer? Did they do it for shorter? Anyway, I doubt the shooting is justified. I doubt that shooting somebody in the back like that is justified, even if they're reaching into a car. Maybe it is when the police are not trained. Maybe it is when the police do not have the capabilities to protect themselves, to defend themselves, and they feel helpless, and therefore they do what they do out of panic. But that's exactly why I think we need to care. We need to care because any one of us could have a confrontation with the police, and we do not want them to be resulting to fear-induced, force. Right. All right. I just don't see it. I don't see what the objection is to getting police actually trained to deal with these things, other than shooting people. And fear is a major factor, because they're not trained well. They're not trained well. There's very little training the police go through. You have to go through, I think, more training to get a license to shampoo hair in California than you do for the police. I'm making that up. That is an exaggeration. But you got to train them. You got to get them to a position where they're not afraid, where they are competent, and where they're physically fit so that they can deal with the situation. And if that means, by the way, the women can't be cops, then women can't be cops. I don't care. I have nothing for or against this. I just think it's a matter of hiring the right police and training them properly. Training them properly. And then, of course, what is the community response to this? Before there's any evidence, before we know the details of the facts, before the jury rules on this, before the police have decided whether to try the policeman or not, riots break out. People start burning their own community, burning their own town, destruction, looting, riots, a complete breakdown of civilization. To the point where even in Wisconsin, with a Democratic governor and a Democratic mayor, they've called in the National Guard. The last thing I read just before the show was that they've had a conversation with Trump, and they're sending in federal troops or federal law enforcement agents, I don't know what that is, to try to calm things down. Last night, some guy with a gun started shooting people. So we've got 2 dead and 1 person wounded. The guy with the gun was white. I don't know if that means anything. I don't know what the conflict was about. I don't know why he was walking around the streets during riots and demonstrations with a semi-automatic weapon. Even if he didn't intend to shoot anybody, this is what happens when you have a semi-automatic weapon on you. You get into a confrontation and you shoot the gun, and people die. What was he doing there? He was 17, white guy, running around in the middle of the street, in the middle of riots and demonstrations, with a semi-automatic gun. What was he doing there? I mean, that is nuts. Was he out on a stroll and took the gun to defend himself because he had to get somewhere, and that was the only, he had to walk right through where people were rioting? He was protecting property. It didn't look like protecting property to me. He was walking in the middle of the street from the video I saw. It was a store? I don't know. But this is the kind of stuff that is going to bring mayhem, destruction, violence, and deaths. Somebody says he wasn't even from Wisconsin. So whose store was he protecting? Right? I've got a bunch. Clear gray sky says he was protecting property. Whose property? And Trevor says he wasn't even from Wisconsin. So what is it? Was he protecting property? Whose property was he protecting? Why was he protecting the property? I mean, I understand the Korean store owners who stood in their stores with semi-automatic guns and it was their property to protect. And it was clear. What was he doing there in the middle of the street with a semi-automatic gun running down the street? Yes, clearly somebody knocked him down, but why? Why was he walking down the street in the middle of a riot with a semi-automatic gun? There was no property there. A gun, not a rifle. He was walking down with a rifle. I don't know. I'm just used to saying semi-automatic gun. You're right. Most guns are semi-automatic, I guess. I have no idea what he was possessed by or not possessed by. He might have been a lefty for all I know. It might have been a right wing. I don't know. But the whole situation is rife for disaster. And, I blame this on cops who are not trained. I blame this on these people who riot, break property, destroy stuff, whether it's Antifa, whether it's BLM, whether it's the entire leftist agenda of creating anarchy and mayhem in the streets, which, by the way, is going to guarantee that they lose this election to the extent that they continue like they are. I mean, if I was a Democratic strategist, I would be saying, stop. You're handing this election to Trump. The more you do this, the more people are going to vote for Trump. All right, so this whole issue of rioting, looting, destruction, it's just horrific. But there's a whole attempt out there to try to justify it, in terms of anger and in terms of frustration and in terms of, we talked about before about redistribution. But I found this video, and it's a video that was sent to me by somebody because I've asked you guys to send me videos you want me to comment on, and somebody sent me this video to comment on. It's called Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. And it's interesting. The guy's very well spoken and looks like a really successful guy. And so I thought, this would be a good one to talk about. And it's particularly relevant right now. So what he does is he takes questions from people and he answers them. And the questions are particularly, from white people. And he answers them from the perspective of a black guy, right? And so we're gonna look at this video and we're gonna analyze it, and we'll see if let me find it. There it is. All right, there it is. He's got a bunch of these videos, not that many because I think he started recently. He also brings people on the show and has discussions with them. I haven't watched those videos yet, but it looks like those are interested. But anyway, this is the first show where he is presenting this thing. Now, let me just start by saying, the whole approach of white people, white people asking black people asking, that whole approach of looking at things from a collectivistic perspective, looking at things solely from the prism of color, from the prism of race, is a recipe for disaster. Nothing good, nothing positive can come from this. This is a recipe for more racism, for more discrimination, and really for more collectivism, because the whole approach is from the perspective of race, from the perspective of collectivism. And unfortunately, this guy is guilty of this. When asked on a different show, not this show, whether he would like to see a world of color blindness, he says no. He says, something about color is beautiful and differences in culture are beautiful and so on. But that's not the point of color blindness. And let me just say, my view is we should be colorblind when judging the character of people. We should be colorblind when judging the quality of a culture. The character of people is not determined by their race. The culture is not determined by race. People should be judged by their character as individuals. Culture should be judged by whether they are pro-life or anti-life, pro-human values or anti-human values, pro-human progress or anti-human progress. And color of skin, the geographic location of the culture, has nothing to do with any of those. Anyway, so I thought we'd watch this and analyze it, and we're going to start with the first question he gets. He has a little intro, which I'm skipping, and we'll start with the first question he gets, which is about riots. So it's perfect.
Emmanuel, why are you all rioting? I understand protesting, but why riot? And to that I submit this. MLK said that rioting is the language of the unheard. For years, black people have tried peacefully protesting, going back to 1965 and before with the Selma March, and that didn't work.
And that didn't work, so he keeps repeating this. I find it interesting that there's this assumption that the civil rights movement just didn't happen, that no progress was made in the 1960s, that we still somehow live under Jim Crow laws, that they're still being asked to go to the back of the bus. I mean, it not only is an injustice to the heroism of those who struggled to get rid of the Jim Crow laws and to bring about the recognition of the rights of blacks, particularly in the South, but really all over the country. Remember, things like redlining were government policy, even in the North, even in California. So getting rid of government discrimination at the federal and state level was a real achievement, a major achievement of Martin Luther King and many of the civil rights leaders of the time. So if you start from the assumption that we're still, in a sense, in the middle of the civil rights era, that is, 70 years later, nothing has changed, everything is the same, then yeah, that should lead to unbelievably frustration. Wow, we've been fighting this battle and we're still being discriminated by the federal government. We're still being discriminated by the state governments. But that is just a straight evasion of the reality. Now, we'll get to the fact that there's still racism out there. But the reality is that a lot was achieved in the 1960s in terms of racial equality. And by the way, as you know, I don't consider race as a legitimate concept. I use it here as they use it, as everybody else uses it. But I don't believe race is a valid category, a valid concept to differentiate between people. But the idea that nothing has been achieved, nothing has changed, is just absurd. The 1960s civil rights movement led to complete dismantling of Jim Crow. It led to the complete elimination of the laws that discriminate against blacks in America. And indeed, and tragically in my view, and part of the problem today, the 1960s civil rights movement actually led to laws at the federal level that discriminate in favor of blacks. Affirmative action is a great example of that. Equal housing, inability to discriminate on private property, which violates private property rights in the name of anti-discrimination. So the civil rights movement, while dismantling real discrimination, also brought about what people call reverse discrimination, which I think has perpetuated the idea of race, has perpetuated the importance of race, and has perpetuated frustration, resentment, and brought us to the point where we are today. But that they ignore completely. because that is a reverse form of discrimination. And I find it tragic that this guy who looks like he's, I don't know, his late 20s, maybe early 30s, or maybe his early 20s, I don't know, is not aware of the massive progress that is made. Today, to say you're racist, most people, 90% of people look down on you if you say you're racist. And good, that's progress. In the 1950s, many people in the South said unbelievably racist things, considered themselves racist, and it was a point of pride. The difference is dramatic. And by not recognizing that major progress has been made in this country with regard to treatment of blacks, you are weakening your own position. You're weakening your own stand. And you're excusing the kind of violence that should never be excused. There is no excuse for riots unless you're launching a revolution. And then it better be for the right cause. It better be for more liberty. So let's keep listening.
And then in 2016, Colin Kaepernick, he took a knee, and that agenda got moved to a flag, which was never the goal. He just wanted to raise awareness on social injustice. So that didn't work. And so now we've seen riots.
I mean, if there's social injustice, and there is racism out there. There's no question there is racism out there, though I don't think anywhere near to the extent that they claim there is and to the degree that they claim there is. But there is racism out there. Is the way to do it? Is the way to deal with it? Is the way to solve it through violence? Is the way to solve it through rioting? And what is the agenda? If the agenda of the rioting, if the agenda of the demonstration was a revolution to bring about true colorblindness, that would be one thing. But we've seen what the riots are aimed to do. It's to destroy the system. It's to destroy capitalism. It's to destroy freedom. It's to destroy businesses, to destroy property, and to annihilate this system that we have that is the United States of America. I mean, that's explicitly what they argue. Trevor asks, if riots persist in leftist cities, is it moral for governors to enact better stand-your-ground laws which would result in more deadly force being used in protecting property? No, I think the solution is not for governors to say, we give up. We're gonna let citizens protect their own property. I think if riots persist, then the solution is to bring out the National Guard and to arrest people en masse and to keep them in jail for longer periods of time, to prosecute them, to try them, and to put them in jail. The solution is not for the government to say, we want anarchy, we want people to go out there to defending their own property, and everybody's their own cop, which would create massive mayhem, like we saw with this guy walking down the street, whether he was protecting property or not, with a semi-automatic rifle and 2 people got killed. And he could have easily got killed. The solution needs to be for the police to actually do their job, for the government to actually do their job, for people who are in charge of law and order to actually provide us with law and order. Not to default on that by saying, no, we can't do it, you do it. Somebody says again, super chat, I would suggest that these incidents are mostly the result of hiring policies over decades. Maybe, but then we need to reform the police so that the hiring policies moving forward are changed. And maybe in some cities, in some places, it makes sense to fire all the police and to rehire new people on the basis of better standards, as was done in places like Georgia, the country, when they wanted to eradicate corruption among the police. All right, I want to get back to today's discussion of of rioting. So his point is, it's never worked. Civil rights movement didn't work. Colin Kaepernick's taking a knee didn't work.
Because black people and hurt people are trying to get the attention of the oppressor. They're trying to raise awareness of the oppression.
So here's the problem. The problem is that you view people as monoliths. You view people as collectives. We, black people, are trying to raise the awareness of the oppressor, white people. But that's not the issue. The issue is some white people, some police. The issue is not that we live in a country that's fundamentally racist, even though I think there are a lot of racist people in America, more than I thought in the past. So, somebody says, you're not white, Yaron, you can't empathize in any way. We'll get to that, because there's a sense in which that's right. There's a sense in which I cannot empathize, and I'll get to that. But the only way to solve problems like this, the only way to get out of this, long term, is to change the orientation from us versus them versus us, them as a group, we as a group, they did this to us, and we, and start talking about I, and me, and you. I am not an oppressor. My skin color happens to be white. I am not a racist. My skin color happens to be white. You are not a rioter. Your skin color happens to be black. We've got to get away. We've got to get away from treating people as members of groups. We got to get to the point of treating people as individuals. And we're a long way from that, and unfortunately videos like this do not help us get there. Do not help us get there, in spite of what I sense is real sincerity from this guy.
I was biking around Lake Austin the other day, and there was a white girl around about 15
weird
meters ahead.
analogy he's giving here.
And as I'm on my bike, I say to her, on your left, because I want to notify her I'm coming so that she can change her course of action. I get 10 meters away and I increase my voice, on your left, because she had yet to move. I get 5 meters away and she's still there, and I say, on your left, because I realize if she doesn't change her course of action, there will be a collision. And as I approach her, I yell, on your left, and we collide. My goal was never to hit her, but because she had her headphones in, she didn't hear me, and so she didn't change her course of action.
So the idea is that American culture has their headphones in. And blacks in American culture have been telling us, change your course, change your course, change your course. And because we've had our headphones in, we've been dealing with other things. We haven't paid any attention to them. But what does it mean to change your course? Have blacks in America been saying, be individualists, stop discriminating, stop the racism, train police better. Here are 5 things that need to be done, 10 things that need to be done. And of course, there's no evidence, clear-cut evidence, empirical evidence, that the police shoot black men more than they do others. But this country does have a history of racism. And I believe has a lot of racists in it. But how do you deal with racism? You don't deal with racism by being a racist. You don't deal with racism by being a collectivist. You don't deal with racism by saying, you're all racist. We need to change the system. We destroy what we have. We need socialism, or we need, I don't know. What is the solution? What is it that they're trying to gain our attention for? On a bike, it's easy. You change your lane. But what does it mean to change a lane when it comes to these issues? They don't tell us. Because changing a lane is far too dramatic. What they really mean is either they don't know, I think that's the more innocent of them, and the more serious of them, what they mean is much scarier. It's way too scary. And they know it.
I believe that that's the same thing black people are doing now. 1960s, we're yelling, we're oppressed.
And there was a consequence of that. Something was done about it. Don't evade that.
But the course of action wasn't changed. And so we again yell, we're oppressed.
Course of action was changed. Whatever oppression you have today is significantly on a scale, on orders of magnitude different than it was in the 1960s. You are today not systematically discriminated against by the state. Indeed, you could make the argument you're systematically discriminated for by the state in hiring, in education, higher education, in other formats. So, all this anger, all this frustration that I understand actually exists. If this is the attitude, nothing has changed. Everything's just as bad. Nobody ever listens to us. That's just nonsense.
But the course of action wasn't changed. And so again, we yell, we're oppressed. And now you see the collision that's occurred in America. So while I don't condone rioting, and I'm sure you don't either, because for the most part, black people and others that are looting and rioting destructively, they're burning down their own homes. But when you think about the 5 different stages of grief, you come up to one stage, which is called anger. And sometimes emotions, they don't know their actions.
So he's not condoning the riots, but he is excusing them. He's giving them a justification that does not belong. He's giving it a justification that is not right. He's giving it a justification that doesn't work. If racism is a problem, anger will not solve it. If racism is a problem, rioting and burning down your own homes doesn't solve it. If racism is a problem, emotion is not the solution. Emotion and being a slave to that emotion, giving in to that emotion, acting out on that emotion for your own destruction by burning down your own home, or the homes of your neighbors, of the homes of the businesses that serve you, is not only not a solution, but it will make the problem only worse. And acting out like this doesn't cause people who are racist or might be sanctioning racism or might be even inadvertently promoting racist policies. It's not going to change their minds. It's going to make it worse. Violence in this context can only be appropriate if you're truly trying to change the government, to change the world, to establish some kind of revolution. But what kind of revolution do they want?
I remember my mom, when I was a child, she lost her sister, and I just remember her yelling and screaming. And I come outside my room and I see my mom throwing herself into a wall, and I'm wondering what happened. And my dad tells me that my mom's sister had died. Thinking back on that, throwing yourself into a wall, it's not going to change anything. You're actually harming yourself.
Yeah.
But sometimes pain and hurt, it doesn't know how to express itself.
So teach it how to express itself. Focus your efforts on teaching people how to express their anger, their frustration. And maybe, if you teach them the truth about what their anger and frustration should be, focused at, maybe then you'd have a more constructive solution. Because this cannot be an adult solution to the problem. This is a little child throwing a tantrum. And if you're a little child, you'll be treated as a little child. And that will not solve anybody's problems. Don't excuse the rioting under any circumstances. It is not excusable. No matter what the ultimate circumstances of the shooting turn out to be, rioting is not the answer. All right, before I go on, and I want to go on because there's some other segments here that I think are interesting. We got 89 likes, 250 watch. 2 dislikes. I'm not surprised. This issue always gets a few people who dislike what I think is a relatively nuanced position, and nuance is something people don't tend to like. But I'm sure there are more than 89 likes. So please, of the 220 people watching right now, please go over and like the show if you get any value from it. It helps with the algorithms. It helps with YouTube. It's just a good sign when we have a lot of likes. It elevates the show up in the standings, and it elevates my general channel up in the standing on YouTube. And we all want, hopefully you guys all want this show to be successful on YouTube. So please like the show and comment and participate. And the more engagement there is, the more YouTube likes me, which means we get more out of the show, the more YouTube likes me. YouTube liking me is good, all right? Let's see. Also, of course, don't forget to share. Sharing is the most important thing you can do on social media. It is the way in which you can introduce new people to the show. And of course, those of you who really do get value from the show and who think that they should provide value for value trade, then please support the show. You can do so on a super chat, or you can do so on yaronbrookshow.com/support, on Patreon, on Subscribestar, on Locals. And thank you for the hundreds of people who actually do support the show. It's amazing how many people do support the show, and how generous many of you are. So thank you. All right, let's keep going. There's more that this guy has to say, and that I think is worth hearing.
Another question I get from my white friends, they ask me, why do you think white privilege exists?
By the way, the whole notion of thinking of people in terms of white friends, brown friends, green friends, black friends is bizarre to me. Again, the more you make race an issue, the more race will be an issue. I have friends. They have a variety of different skin tones, a variety of different skin colors. Who cares? That's not what defines them. It's not what makes them who they are. And I'm suspicious of people generally who think in terms of, I have some Jewish friends, I have some non-Jewish friends. What the hell? Stop focusing on my white friends, my black friends, my green, that's exactly the problem. And again, the more, oh wow, Richard, thank you. The more we focus on race, the more we talk race, the more we emphasize race, the more we categorize people based on their race, the more we put them into groups and tribes and racial identifiers, the more racism we will have. No question. No matter what your motives are. And again, I get the sense that this guy has positive motives.
And I say this, if you and I were in a race, and the official at the start line, they held me back for the first 200 meters, and you had a 200-meter then head start, the only way to level out that race is to either stop you from running or put me on a golf cart and catch you up and catch myself up. Well, you see, what we've done in America is we've simply said, okay, Emmanuel, you're now free to run. And we've acted as if it's a fair race, when in all honesty, black people were held back for hundreds of years. And so if in the late 1960s we say, okay, black people, you can go now, that's not a fair race. LBJ, he said it best when he said, you can't shackle and chain someone for hundreds of years, liberate them to freely compete with the rest, and still justly believe that you've been fair.
Now, that's pretty interesting, right? The analogy, right? Because in a race, if you give somebody a 200-yard advantage, foot advantage, whatever, then we all know that's not fair. And if you hold somebody back purposefully, that's not fair. And we know that Jim Crow laws were not fair and slavery was not fair. But what is the problem with using the analogy of a race for economics? Now, by the way, just as an aside, this guy is the son of an immigrant who came to the United States. I don't know exactly when, but came to the United States after Jim Crow laws are gone, after slavery no longer existed. His family was not held back. Indeed, my guess is that the reason his family came to the United States is because he had more opportunities in the United States than any other place on the planet. The reason they emigrated here is because even though he's black, he had amazing opportunities. And indeed, we know that blacks from Caribbean, blacks from Nigeria, blacks from Africa, they've done, over the last few decades, done phenomenally well in the United States. But why is an economy not a race? Somebody says, because it's not a pie. Yes, because it's not a zero-sum game. It's not a race. It's not a race with winners and losers. An economy is a place in which we trade. Yes, some people make more than others, but they only make more than others by making more for others. Somebody wins when I win. In a sense, everybody wins their own race. You're not running against other people. You're running against yourself. You're trying to maximize your own ability. And indeed, somebody else running ahead of you faster makes it easier for you to do better. This is why the whole analogy breaks down, because it doesn't make any sense. As I've said many times, we've all benefited enormously from the Jeff Bezos and the Bill Gateses and the Steve Jobses of the world. Our lives are better for that, even though they won the race. I'm not a billionaire. They are. And yet we're all better off. So the idea of looking at races in terms of, again, groups, collectives, in terms of they're ahead, they're behind, they're winning, they're losing. No. Your life is your responsibility. Make the most out of the trades you have an opportunity to do. And if you are barred from a certain profession by law, if you're prevented from participating in a trade by law, or if the culture is so bad that you cannot trade with people because they are such racist, then yeah, that's something to complain about. And to the extent that there's racism in America, yes, that's something to complain about. But this is not a race. This is not a zero-sum competition. This is not a good analogy. And by the way, it is true. It is absolutely true that the fact that the United States of America is held back through slavery and then through Jim Crow, the black population, that it excluded it from certain activities, professions, access to certain benefits. The fact that we've done that we did that this country did that for decades, that is a travesty. That is unbelievably unjust. That is horrific. But what is the solution to something like that? It's to get rid of it, to stop it, to treat people like they should be treated, with equal rights, to take away the barriers for opportunities. And yes, the children of those people who are freed for the first time are going to struggle. It's not easy coming out of slavery. It's not easy coming out of an environment like Jim Crow. And it's a struggle, and that's tragic, but it is a reality. There's no way to fix that reality, unfortunately. It's hard. But the more you hold on to the fact that you are a victim, the more you hold on to the fact that the reason you have not succeeded in life is because your great-great-great-great-grandparents were slaves, the more you hold on to the fact that you don't not succeed in life because 70 years ago there was Jim Crow, the less you will be successful. Less you will be able to run, not that race, run that, whatever it is, your life, your career. The more you believe you're a victim, the less happy, the less prosperous, the less successful you will be in your life. If you want to maximize opportunities for people who were once discriminated against, what you want to fight for is freedom. What you want to fight for is individual rights. And what you want to fight for is individualism, the antithesis of racism, the antithesis of collectivism. What you want to fight for is that people be treated, not equally, in a sense of treated one-on-one equally, but based on their character, based on their ability, based on their qualities, based on their qualifications. What you want is capitalism and its defense of property rights, capitalism and its defense of individual rights. And it's tragic for them, for all of us, that over the last 20, 30 years, particularly I'd say over the last 12, 15 years, this country has been moving steadily away from individualism, from rights, from freedom, from maximizing opportunity, towards greater and greater collectivism, tribalism, limitations of opportunity, closing gates, closing opportunities to people. Instead of people like this, articulate, smart people like this, fighting for privatizing education so that their children, their families' children, and the people they care about's children can get the best education possible. Instead, they're writing and burning down towns and cities across the country. All right, we've got a bunch of Super Chat questions here. This is great. Thank you all. Keep them coming, particularly the ones $20 or above. Let's keep going. There's still one other point that I want to address that he makes.
So white privilege it's having a head start due to hundreds and hundreds of years of systematic and systemic racism.
That's just bizarre to me, right? I mean, there have been hundreds and hundreds, arguably well over 1,000 years of systemic anti-Semitism. And I come from a Jewish background, for whatever that means, for whatever that's worth. My ancestors were discriminated against. They were harassed. They were killed. They were murdered. They were slaughtered. Most of my family were killed in the Second World War, in the Holocaust. But before that, Russian pogroms and on and on and on. My family was slaughtered and butchered going back 1,200 years, 1,500 years, 2,000, over 2,000 years, really. Do I carry with me the baggage of that? Has that impeded my ability to be successful in life? I mean, you can make the argument that my family would have been richer, but that's me. I wouldn't have been richer. Is my success in life dependent on my success, on my father's success, who's dependent on his father's success, who's dependent on his father's success? And of course, it's not true of this guy, the guy talking. Again, he came here from, as far as I know, from the Caribbean, or his parents. They came here, why? Because the opportunities. What about blacks who come from Africa, who do very well in America? I've told you, I think before, that the most educated nationality of Americans in the United States today are Nigerians. They're the most educated Americans. If you're going to instill in people the idea, not that they are victims of people acting against them today. I mean, that there's a solution to. We can solve the problem of racism or Jim Crow laws or problem today where there's somebody is mistreating somebody else. That can be solved. But if you're a victim because for the last several hundred years your ancestors were mistreated, you're not being mistreated right now, but for the last 100 years you were mistreated. There's no solution to that. There's no way to stop that. There's just no way to solve that problem. I cannot go back in time and free the slaves. I cannot go back in time and get rid of Jim Crow laws. This is the reality we have. How do we solve it? We solve it by treating people as individuals, which both would get rid of racism and create massive economic opportunities for everybody. But that, of course, is the last thing they want. And it's the last thing anybody wants. So both sides, all sides of this argument, unfortunately, rely on collectivism, statism.
It's having a head start intrinsically built into your life. It's not saying your life hasn't been hard, but what it's saying is your skin color hasn't contributed to the difficulty in your life.
Now that's a different argument. Now, if you can say that a particular individual's skin color has made his life more difficult, then I have sympathy for that. And I would like to know why. And that is a problem that we can try to fix. And it's the problem of racism in our society. But your skin color, you have to show how in your life your skin color has made your life harder. And the fact that my skin color has not made my life harder, although you could argue that my Jewishness has, is not a privilege. That's the way it should be. Privilege is something special. Privilege is a grant given to you by the state. No, nobody's skin color should matter in their lives. That's where you want to get to. That's the point you want to achieve. But the more you emphasize skin color, the further away you get from that. So yes, I would like to live in a world in which nobody's skin color made their life hard. That skin color was indeed irrelevant for anything important in life. For anything in life. Why just important? For anything other than, I don't know how much vitamin C your skin absorbs, and whether you're susceptible to skin cancer or other cancers or whatever. Skin color should have no relevance to anything other than, medical issues.
I live in an affluent neighborhood in Austin, Texas, and if I ever go to my mailbox and I see a white woman walking up to the mailbox, I consciously sit in my car because I don't want her to feel like I'm a threat.
Now that's sad. And if that is true, that is very sad. And this is where I want to sympathize with this guy a little bit. To the extent that black parents have to have a talk with their kids about how to deal with the police, to the extent that a black man is truly afraid to go out into the street because a white one might feel afraid of him, to the extent that he feels like he will be discriminated against, or to the extent that he thinks that something bad will happen to him just because of his skin color. Whether that is justified or not, you don't know that he's a lying person. You don't know anything about him. But it's part of the problem is that is your first response rather than sympathizing. If that is a reality, that's not good. To the extent that there's a reality out there, and look, you hear this from blacks in this country a lot. It's not just him. You hear it from successful blacks. You hear it from conservative blacks. That there is a conversation to be had with their kids. That there is an issue. At least they perceive this to be an issue. And that's sad if that's true. And that's something needs to be done about. Again, the thing to be done about it is to fight the racism behind it. It's to change people's ideas about race. Rioting is not going to solve this. Rioting only makes this worse. I don't know why you guys flip out when somebody says that. I mean, if he was the only person in the world saying it, then you could say he's a liar. But a lot of people say it. A lot of people feel it. A lot of people think that. And if that's true, that is sad. If that's true, that is bad. That's true, that affects all of us. And to the extent that there's racism in this country, and there's no question in my mind there is, then that needs to be dealt with. We need to fight against the racism.
If I'm on an elevator with a white person, I try to hit the button first and get off the elevator first, because I don't want them to perceive me as a threat, because I realize
Sounds like
at
a very
any point in
considerate
time,
guy.
whiteness can be weaponized. We saw that this past week. Amy Cooper, Central Park, the woman who called the cops on a black man.
Good example. This is a really good example. This woman, Amy Cooper, not a made-up story, real story.
Wanted her to leash her dog because it was illegal to walk your dog without a leash. And she used two words that are a death sentence for black people. When she called the cops, she said, "There's a black man who's threatening my life." Both of those things, as far as when you compile them together, were a lie. Because that black man, he was a bird watcher. And while so many people saw that incident and they were heartbroken, I, as a black man, saw that incident and was reminded of 1955. Emmett Till, 14-year-old boy, who was lynched, mutilated, and killed by two white men because a white woman made a false claim saying that he flirted with her. In 2017, that white woman recanted that story. In 1956, the two white men that killed him, they got off. And they admitted that they did it because they knew they couldn't be charged again due to double jeopardy.
Now, note that he contradicts himself here, right? Because that's the progress that we've made. The fact is that the woman in Central Park was embarrassed by what she did. The fact is that the woman in Central Park apologized for what we did. She was prosecuted for what she did. The fact is that the black man was not lynched, that there was a lot of understanding towards that black man. But it's also true that it happened. He was a bird watcher. The police being called on him because he was black. So, you can say there's no racism out there. You can say he makes all this up, all you want. But the fact is that there's a significant percentage of the population of this country that fears that their skin color would get them in trouble. Skin color would get them in trouble. How is that right? How is that good to live in a country where a certain percentage of the population that thinks that their skin color can get them in serious problems? And you can dismiss the woman in Central Park, as somebody in the chat does, as a Karen, which is a stupid way of dismissing anything. But it happened, and it's real, and it didn't happen in a void. Some stuff like this happens every day. People out there are racist, implicitly, even when they don't think about it. And that's what needs to be dealt with. And the way to deal with it is not to dismiss it, to ridicule it, to say he's a liar, but to bring it back to the principle. And the principle is we should treat people as individuals. And if there are people out there who don't treat people as individuals, if there are people out there who are racist, whether they're white, whether they're black, whether they're Hispanic, whether they're any color, then those people should be dealt with. Not necessarily legally, but by us, by our society. We should not be tolerating racists of any kind. We should not acknowledge racism. We should not promote racism. You don't ban it. You speak out against it. You shun people who exhibit it. You avoid having any association with people who are racists. I've told you this, a long time ago. There's very few things that people do that I believe are as irrational as to be a racist. It's why I won't tolerate it. I won't support it in any way. It's why I won't participate in this stupid, I don't know, IQ arguments and debates. I mean, I will participate in them to say that they're stupid, that they're irrelevant, and that they only promote the worst in people. Racism must be eliminated. Racism must be eradicated from the face of the earth. We must argue against the racists on this chat, YouTube chat, and in everywhere else in our lives. And that means we need to argue about racism wherever we see it. Whoever preaches it, whoever practices, doesn't matter. Somebody says, why do you say the Karen label is stupid? Because I don't like these labels. I think these labels are stupid. A certain type of woman is a Karen. Really? Are all the kinds of women who do XYZ all the same? Why are we so quick to label certain behaviors and dismiss them offhand? I know people, women who complain and so on, who are completely rational. And I know some who are completely emotional. But you're going to lump them all because the behavior looks similar and call them some name. I think we're way, I mean, it's part of this, the way I think a simplistic mind works. Quickly categorize everybody into simple labels, no nuance, no thought. Not to mention, some people actually have that name. And again, treat people as individuals. Treat people on a case-by-case basis. What are they doing? Why are they doing it? Why are they behaving this way? What is going on? It's all about individualism. Stephanie wants you to use Stephanie for something. I'm not sure what. Maybe high IQ. It's just... And to use a common name as a stereotype for a certain type of woman is also wrong, because there are Karens who are not Karens. So I think it's this lazy way of thinking that people, or non-thinking that people have. How do you differentiate between rational pattern recognition and racism? The big difference is the one's rational and the one's not. So that's how you differentiate. Is it based on facts, evidence? Is your fear, let's say, that you have, is your anxiety, is your feeling towards this other human being based on facts, evidence, reality? Or is it based on the color of their skin? Is it rational? Is your behavior towards this other human being rational? Is it based on, which means based on facts, based on reality? That's how you differentiate. All right. Ooh, that's, wow. Now in 15 minutes. Okay, so let's get to the Super Chat questions quickly, because otherwise it's going to be really long. All right, let me take one that's on topic. I think the riots can be explained by the lack of purpose in young people's lives. The rioting gives them a goal and something to sacrifice their lives for, and the government gave them the free time and money to do so. I think that's right. I think that's absolutely right. I think it's partially, and this is why I said that in another show, that the riots cannot be detached from the whole coronavirus thing. That the riots cannot be detached from the fact that for months people have been stuck at home doing nothing. The fact that there are no jobs. The fact that the government has just written them checks, told them to stay home, told them not to go to work, told them, by the way, that they're not essential workers. There's an insult for you. The government gets to decide who's an essential worker and who's not. And they don't have purpose beyond that. And then I think it's a consequence of an educational system that hasn't taught them anything, hasn't given them the skills, that has taught them resentment, that has taught them to be victim, to feel like a victim, that has taught them that it's all the man's fault. So yeah, it's the lack of purpose. And I blame that lack of purpose on the government, on COVID, on the response to COVID, and on the educational system, which again is ruled by government. But it's definitely a lack of purpose. People with purpose don't go out and burn other people's businesses for no purpose. Frank asked this because it's a related question, not because of the amount of money put down. If I live in Africa, would I have white privilege? It depends where. It depends where. Right? You certainly would have in the past if you lived in South Africa. You're still expected to feel white privilege in South Africa, and that's why there's discrimination against whites in South Africa in order to eradicate that privilege. But if you look at other African countries, there certainly was a period in which whites ruled brutally over other people. But yeah, white privilege is an anti-concept. I've talked about that. The whole idea is bizarre. But under apartheid, whites did have privilege in the sense that whites were given by the government special privileges that were not granted to other people of other colors. They actually had racial categories. They had whites, they had mixed, and they had blacks. And they were treated differently. White privilege, the way it's used in America today, is an anti-concept. But in South Africa, in apartheid, it is a real thing. Or in other parts in Africa that were colonized by whites and by Europeans, and where there was clearly discrimination. There was clearly racism. I feel like these BLM, SJWs, and leftists are so irrational. No matter what they are told, they will dismiss it because it doesn't align with their beliefs. What do you do if people are like that? Yes, I think there's a certain percentage of them that are like that. I think for the most part, it's the minority of people. I think most people are in the middle. Most people go to demonstrations because they're against police brutality. Most people go to demonstrations because they think there's racism in the culture and they want to demonstrate against that. And they're generally they think it's a good cause. I think it's a minority that are rioting. It's a minority that are BLM. It's a minority that are social justice warriors, and they need to be, they need to be ignored intellectually. You should be talking to the more rational people, to the people who are tricked into participating in the cause. You should be talking to the people who are not part of that movement, who are not completely irrational. Jennifer asked, if statistics showed, for example, that young males commit crimes more than old women, could it be rational in a certain context to be more afraid of young men than old women? Absolutely. Absolutely. In the right context. And I'm not saying you should never, in a particular context, you should not be more afraid of a black man than a white man. If you're in certain neighborhoods where black crime is high and almost all the criminals happen to be black, yeah, that is a rational fear, but it's rational. It's based on data. It's based on statistics. I doubt that is the case in suburban Austin, Texas. So again, the fear can be rational or not. I mean, I'm all for profiling. I think profiling is right. I was for profiling after 9/11. I'm for profiling criminally. That is, if somebody who happens to be white commits a crime, then the police shouldn't stop black people. They should only look for white people. That's profiling. But you're doing it after a crime. Thank you, Dr. Brook. What would you do if a mob showed up at a restaurant where you were dining, insisting that you raise a fist? I saw that video of this poor woman surrounded by thugs, by a mob, by a mob that looks violent, and demanding that you raise the fist. I would not raise a fist. I don't care what the hell they did. I mean, maybe if they threatened my children were right there, and I couldn't defend myself, then maybe I would raise a fist just to protect my children. But no, if it was just me, I would not raise my fist. And if that meant I would be beaten up, then that would mean I would be beaten up. I would not give in to the mob, no matter what. What do you make of black people calling each other brother and sister to complete strangers? This is an indication of tribalistic religious-like culture. Yeah, I think so. I think so, particularly when they don't do it to maybe somebody who's white who lives next door to them, but they do it to somebody black that they barely know at all. And again, I think our culture encourages them towards the tribalism. I mean, it has to do with white people ask me a question because I represent black people. The whole attitude, and I think whites have the same thing. The whole attitude out there is tribal today. The whole attitude is collectivist. The whole attitude is racist. Racism is on the rise in America, both in the black community and in the white community. The importance placed on race is increasing in the world in which we live. So it's sad state of affairs in the world in which we live today. It's a really sad state of affairs. That because of the increase in tribalism and collectivism everywhere, across the board, everywhere we look. Okay, that was the restaurants. I'm still looking for questions on topic. Okay. This is not an issue of police brutality or racism. Jacob Blake had a criminal history and was resisting arrest when this happened. I'm still not sure that justifies shooting somebody in the back. I don't know. Maybe we'll find out more. But I think police should be trained to do a better job. And I've said this many, many times, not just today. Before this incident, I think police should. I mean, this wasn't a civilian who shot him because he was attacking him. This wasn't a situation where somebody untrained was confronted by a criminal. This is a policeman who should be trained and qualified to deal with individuals who are a threat to them without having to use lethal force. Lethal force should be a last resort. What do you make of the blacks who say they don't feel afraid nor oppressed and are treated with cruelty by leftists because of it? I say good for them, that they have overcome a bad culture, that they have overcome a culture that encourages them to feel that oppression. Also, you know, not everybody has the same experience. Not everybody grows up in the same family. Not everybody grows up in the same neighborhood. Not everybody has the same experiences with the police, with people around the corner. I mean, it's interesting to watch Ta-Nehisi Coates, and I forget his name. I think Lowry, the black linguists, who's more of a conservative, talk about their views of racism, and some of it is a consequence of, you know, the conclusions they came to as young adults because of how they grew up. People can come to different conclusions, but to say that everybody comes to a conclusion you don't like is not objective. To say that black people, because some black people don't feel afraid or oppressed, is not a counter to the idea that other black people do feel afraid and oppressed and might be justified. So it's not Glenn Lowry. He was the linguist. John McWhorter, sorry. So I got them confused. So John McWhorter was the guy who did the conversation. But again, to say some people are X doesn't mean that everybody who looks like them should be X. Maybe some people were oppressed when they were young and other people weren't, so some people feel oppressed and some people don't. I don't know. But we live in a society in which a significant number of black people feel oppressed and afraid in certain circumstances, and that's sad. And we should figure out why, and we should figure out how to change that. And I think the solution to all of that is individualism and freedom. You can't generalize from examples that fit, your views. You might find an Islamist, a committed Islamist out there. There might be a committed Islamist. I know committed Islamists who would say, oh no, Islam is a religion of peace. Jihad is something very different. And you say, look, here's an Islamist who says jihad is something different. So let's apply that principle to all Islamists. But that would be bizarre because some Islamists believe that jihad is force and jihad is compulsion and jihad is suicide bombing. People can claim to have the same views and interpret them completely differently. People can have the same skin color and interpret their experiences completely differently. And it doesn't make one more legitimate than the other. And I don't believe that one interpretation of jihad is more correct than another interpretation of jihad. The people who want to kill me, I'll kill first. The people who don't want to kill me, fine, leave them alone. I watch for them because I don't trust anybody who's super religious, but they're less of a threat to me. So you have to be able to differentiate between people. All right, let me just see. I answered that one. All right. I know you love eating out with your wife. What would you do if BLM brown shirts assaulted you mid-meal, chanting white silence is violence, and demanded you submit and show solidarity with clenched fist? I would probably leave the restaurant. I mean, what am I going to do? I'm not going to fight them. And same question as before. I'm not going to fight them. And I would leave the restaurant. So I don't know what the point of these questions is. It's to catch me. It's to point out to me that BLM are disgusting and offensive and violent. Yeah, I know this. What are you trying to get you? What's the get you that you're trying to make me say? What would you do? What would you do? What would you do if you were sitting at a table next to me and I was eating dinner with my wife and a bunch of brown shirts showed up and accused me of being a Jew and demanded that I get on the first plane out of the country and go to Israel, as some alt-right have done to me? Not in person maybe, but over online. What would you do? Would you stand up to defend me? Would you help me beat the shit out of them? All right, so yeah, so the violent BLM people are horrific. It's awful, right? You guys view this as theory, but you can look this up online. I was attacked by Antifa. This is not theoretical. Just do Yaron Brook Antifa on YouTube, on my channel, and you will see video of Antifa attacking me. So, yeah, I mean, all of you are brave in a chat on YouTube. Everybody's brave in a chat on YouTube. When everybody saw me, when Antifa attacked me in London, was it 2 or 3 years ago? Oh, I would have beat the hell out of them. Yeah, all right. I'll believe it when I see it, guys. I believe it when I see it that you'll beat them up. But this is not theoretical. I wouldn't use a knife or fork on them. I wouldn't try to fight them. What would be the point? I'd just get beaten up. I'd get up and walk away. Get up and walk away. So, you saw me in front of Antifa. Yeah, Sargon still has the flag. And Antifa tried to intimidate me. I think you can see in the video that I wasn't intimidated. They could have tried to force me to raise a fist. I wouldn't have, other than into their face. What would I do? You have a gun, but you carry the gun everywhere. You carry a gun everywhere. Stefan wants to be hired as my God. Really? Why would I hire anybody as a God? I don't feel that afraid. And I don't know that I would hire you, Stefan, as a God. I don't know you. I would hire one of my Israeli friends who knows Krav Maga, right? So I don't know what these kind of questions are. Antifa came to me, and you can see online what I did. I looked calm and unconcerned because I generally think people who are violent, people like the people yelling there at the restaurant that I saw the video, are pathetic, impotent human beings who are generally cowards, cowards. And they don't scare me. They might punch me, they can hurt me physically, but they don't scare me. They really don't scare me. Somebody says they got the concealed weapons permit. That's great, but when you go to university, you're not allowed to carry it. So I had a concealed weapons permit here in California, but I couldn't use it anywhere. You can't go on a university with it. You can't really go for lots of places with it. I mean, it's nice to have, and I'm all for concealed weapons, but it expired since I don't live in California anymore. Okay, we've got some super chat questions here. Is the reason politicians are keeping the economy on lockdown because they genuinely fear the virus, or they get off having this much control over society? I think it's a combination of both. I think it's the fact that they fear that if a lot of people die, they won't get reelected. They get blamed for that death. They genuinely fear that that people will attack them. In most states that you do surveys, people want the lockdowns. I mean, in Michigan, when those people objected to the lockdowns, in the state house, I think 70% of people wanted the lockdown to keep going. So politicians are doing what the people want. Politicians are risk averse. They tend to do the thing that is going to cause the least explicit damage, what people view as damage. People don't view their lives and the economy being shut down as damaging as the virus. So they and then, of course, they love the power. They love the power. So it's a combination. Do you think if Ayn Rand knew you personally, she would like you? Is it fundamentally second-handed to care about whether other people like you, even people you greatly admire? I don't know. I mean, and I don't think about it. I don't think.
I'm
about
not
it.
sure I understand.
I hope she would have. And the reason I hope she would have is not second-handed, is because given that she is such a great value to me, I hope that, not that would be reciprocated in the sense that I would be a great value to her. I wouldn't expect that, but at least I would be some value to her, that she would like me in the sense, and that would be a value, because that would be meaningful, right? If a great person views you as your value, it says something about who you are and what you are. I'll say it because I think he said this publicly, but Leonard publicly said that he wished that Ayn Rand would have met me, Leonard Peikoff. A long time ago he said that. So, but I don't, and he thought she would have liked me, but I don't know, and I don't think about it one iota. And I don't think it's fundamentally second-handed to care up to a point. You wouldn't change your life based on it. And if somebody you admire doesn't like you, then it should cause you to think about why they don't like you. Is it a flaw in them? Is it a flaw in you? So if you admire somebody, there's a reason you admire them. It's because they represent certain values. And if they don't respond to you, then it might be a learning opportunity for you. It might be an opportunity for you to say, what am I doing wrong? Maybe there's something is wrong with me. Or maybe there isn't. Maybe there's something wrong with them. Or maybe it's just an accident that you didn't hit it off in some way. It's worth rationally evaluating that. What do you make of the fact that 4 of the last 6 presidents have been elected twice? I don't know. I'd say that's what I'd expect, right? It's people don't like change generally. Incumbents have huge advantage of being in the news and being upfront and being in people's face. It's much harder to get people to change than to commit to the same. So it doesn't surprise me at all. Incumbents generally almost never lose. So in the House and the Senate, incumbents usually win. Abbott launches $5 coronavirus test that yields results in 15 minutes. without needing any laboratory equipment, 50 million tests a month to be done. Have they gotten approval from the FDA? Because last I saw, these fast, cheap tests were not approved by the FDA. But that is terrific. And by the way, the Trump administration just announced that they are through the CDC, but guided by Trump, that we shouldn't be testing people who are not symptomatic, which is absurd. We should be testing everybody as frequently as possible. That's how you get rid of this. Test. And if you can test every day at home or every other day at home, that would be ideal. And then as soon as you got it, you'd stop going outside. That's how you kill the disease. But if we don't know if we have it, that's when you have a problem. So test. Tell Trump that we need more testing, not less. He believes in less testing for some irrational, bizarre reason. Thank you, Ron. Off topic, how was your training session yesterday? It was good. I didn't do lower body because after the last training session, I got this really sharp pain in my leg, a pain I'd never had before in my life. It was in like the calf area, and it was really a bit higher up than the calf. Anyway, it was a very, very strange pain. I couldn't tell if it was projecting down from my back, because I've got a lot of back problems, or whether it was a problem in the muscle in the leg itself. So I just decided I wasn't going to do any lower body exercises yesterday. I just did upper body, which is just really 3 exercises: chest press, pull down, and some neck exercises. On Saturday, I go again, and I'll do just one of the lower body exercises. I've had sciatica. I've had it many times for many years. Many kinds of sciatica. I've had 3 back operations, so I know sciatica really well. This did not feel like sciatica. This was a very strange pain that I've never felt before. Anyway, it's gone. It felt really bad one day, and it's gotten better since. I'm gonna, as I said, I'm gonna try to do one lower body exercise on Saturday and try to see if it comes back or if I can control for it. Anyway. Hey, I'd love to do that. Thank you, RYBO Strength Training. I'd love to do that. What I really want is for you to move to Puerto Rico, and then I'd become a regular client, I promise. Twice a week I would go to you. But I need a super slow. I need somebody to do super slow, in Puerto Rico. MLK Jr. said riots are the language of the unheard, but he didn't say anything about how looting is okay. Does the concept of a riot inherently imply violence and infringement on individual rights? I think so. Riot means more than a demonstration. Riot means violence in some form. It usually means property destruction. So I think riot does involve that. Right? And I don't think MLK was justifying it. He was explaining it. Just like this guy tried to explain it. All right, we want more likes. 200. We should have about well over 200 because there've been like 500 people watching this over the last hour and a half. So let's get at it. Okay, now I have some questions, and I'm not going to be able to do all of them, but I've had some questions to be submitted by some of my larger donors who couldn't attend some of the sessions where they asked. So I said I would do it as part of the super chat. So I'll do. Let's see how long these take. But I've got 3. Let's see if I can get to all of them. All right, so this is the first one. I recall watching a video by Leonard Peikoff some time ago. He was asked the question, what to do if a terrorist hijacked a plane and ransomed people for money, I think. What should the government do in response? From memory, he said, that the government should pay the ransom, secure the hostages safely, and then blow the terrorist out of the sky. So is it morally right that in any battle against a person to drop your own moral standing to their level to defeat them? This to me seems to denounce the Michelle Obama comment some years ago, when they go low, we go high. Peikoff's analysis of that situation to me seems spot on, but what is the principle behind it? It's a great question. It's an important question because it gets to the heart of what going high means. Now, I'm not suggesting this is what Michelle Obama meant. I'm sure she didn't mean this. But what I think, and I don't want to speak for Dr. Peikoff, but I'm speaking for me, and I think he would agree. For us, going high means defending and protecting yourself. For me, going high means Justice means destroying those who would destroy you. Going high means pursuing your own values in the self-defense of your own life and property. So I believe that going high means that you destroy your enemy, even if you promise not to. Like in a terrorist situation where they release a terrorist and you say, "Oh no, we won't hurt you," and then you blow them into smithereens. Absolutely. Now, it's not clear to me that I would negotiate to release the hostages. I would try to kill them without giving in to their demands. But there's no question that I would find a way to hunt down every one of those terrorists and kill them. And that is going high. And this is the point where you're getting morality wrong. Is it morally right to drop your own moral standing? Never. But this is not dropping your moral standing. This is living up to your moral standing. My moral standing is to protect my life, to protect my values, and if I'm a government, to protect my people. So it's not dropping your moral standing to their level. They are animals because they have resorted to force instead of to reason. They've resorted to force to solve problems. They've resorted to force not in self-defense, but as an aggressor. You are there in retaliation. You are there as a protector. You are there in self-defense, and you are killing them in self-defense, even though it's after the fact. Because just like if a murderer murders somebody, you say, well, I'm not going to touch them now because they've already done the murder. No, you have to inflict justice on them. And that is morality. That is living up to morality. So it is, I would say, going down to their level means gratuitously going and killing people without consideration for goal or purpose, without consideration for self-defense goal or purpose. Right? That's what they are doing. They're not defending themselves. They're just killing people gratuitously, even if it's for an aim. But that aim is not self-defense, and therefore it's illegitimate to use force. So it's absolutely moral. It's the height of morality to penalize them for what they did. All right, here's another one. I watched a recent ARI webinar titled Recent Antitrust Attacks on Big Tech. ONCOM mentioned that Congress should have received thousands of emails and letters from citizens telling them, quote, I regard this as a moral travesty, that you are hauling our most successful people and you are interrogating them as criminals, and you should be ashamed of yourselves. I agree completely with ONCOM, by the way. Everybody should write their congressman. I would have definitely been proud to send that letter if I had known about the Inquisition beforehand. Do you know of any current or future plans for ARI to have, one, an activist campaign of some sort to use social media to notify us to write a letter to Congress in situations like this, or is that not allowed because of political action? It's not allowed because of political action. It's very tricky. You can do it up to a certain degree, but it's tricky. And we have decided that given that we do other political commentary, that probably crosses the line and would get us in trouble. Now, I can do it on my show. If you're interested in it, I can, rally you on the show, and maybe that's a good idea, because I do think that would have been a fantastic thing to have done while it was going on. Two, as ARI have future plans for a program to reach out to big business owners and try to educate them on the moral courage, and certainly they need to fight back. We have tried over and over and over again to do that in years past without any success. Just no response from them. We've tried to get in front of them. We've tried to present them with programs. We've tried to present them with content. Unfortunately, they're not interested, or it never gets to them, or they're too afraid to engage with us. I think we have to do a good enough job in convincing them that it's safe for them to defend themselves. And we can do that through your first suggestion, the letter writing and all of that, which I think would be a great thing. And I would CC the executive when you write to the congressman. Last question. Thankfully, I was not raised to be religious, and the concept of God never made sense to me. I've never even read the Bible. I have 3 questions related to that. Should one read the Bible for any objective reason? No, not unless you're an activist, an intellectual activist, an intellectual. You have to understand the enemy and you're combating them. So, no, if you're just living your life, if you're not engaged in intellectual battle with people who have read the Bible and that's a relevant issue, then why waste your time? How have you explained to others why the Bible was written? Well, the Bible was written for obvious reasons. I mean, the Bible originally was verbal storytelling, which was intended to coalesce a tribe around a originating myth. The Bible was invented by the Jews or created by the Jews in order to give them purpose around their tribal identity. And it's a creation myth for the tribe. It's a creation myth for human beings. All cultures have creation myths. This is just one of them. And it was written in order to solidify that. And then it was written to provide law. So this comes at a period in civilization where the first human history, where the first civilizations are starting to create laws, where there's the Hammurabi law and later the Jewish law. And the Jewish law is then codified in the Bible. And then it's added because it creates a certain mythology around Jewish history. And the whole point of the Bible was to reinforce Jewish identity, Jewish tribalism, Jewish exceptionalism, and Jewish law. And then, of course, when the Christians spun off from Judaism, they had to create their own founding mythology, and foundation for law, and founding creation to establish what it meant to be a Christian. So it's like every culture has this. It's equivalent of, but much more sophisticated than the mythology of German mythology, or for that matter Greek mythology. The big difference is that Bible was used to really define a particular sect, a particular group, a particular tribe, and make it stand out and give it self-esteem, if you will, and give it identity. And that's why it was written. It was written for all those purposes. Greek mythology is written in order to explain the world to people. It's stories that try to bring order to the chaos around them. And the Bible is written in the same way. It's written to bring order, explain where people came from, explain why we do what we do, explain why nature behaves in the way it does. The Greeks invented all kinds of gods to explain it. The Jews invented one God to explain it all. In a sense, that's more sophisticated. Is religion gaining traction or on decline in the United States? That's really hard to tell. Really hard to tell. I think mysticism is gaining ground in the United States. I'm not sure religion is. Certainly not organized religion right now. I think probably organized religion is on retreat. But mysticism, which is a broader concept, the irrationality, the belief in some kind of other power, other unworldly power, is, I think, gaining ground, unfortunately. All right, let's see. Final 2 Super Chat questions. Dispute among groups should be settled by free discussion, but when disputes arise out of a clash of basic interests, then this be resolved by power and sometimes war. Yeah, it might be resolved by power, but the ideal is, the question has to be asked: is there a real dispute? Is there something real here that is being fought over? Are the groups? Are there any good guys? Who are the good guys in the dispute? Who is right and who is not? But yes, at the end of the day, if groups, this is, by the way, this is why a government exists, to prevent that from happening. So disputes among groups should be settled by free discussion, yes, or by the court of law. So if there are 2 gangs, they can't decide on who owns this property, Ideally, they're all brought in front of a court of law, or the government dismantles both gangs if they're being violent. So this is the whole point of government. The whole point of government is to prevent gang warfare. Anarchy is gang warfare. Anarchy, the only way to resolve disputes is by force. But the whole idea of a civilized legal system is to avoid it getting to force. They can't find it through argument. Bring it in front of a court and settle it there. Force is never the answer. Or force is the last resort. Do you listen to the artist Benjamin Clementine? I do not. Don't know who he is. If not, I would recommend, I think you should. Some of his inspirations came from Debussy and Satie. Cool. Benjamin Clementine. All right. Okay, guys. Thanks, everybody. Next show will be on Saturday, I think at 3 p.m. Pacific time. Saturday, 3 p.m. Pacific time. I expect some changes might occur, but you will find out. But yeah, and yes. Don't forget, before you leave, please like the show. If you liked it, like the show. It's easy. Don't forget to share the show. And of course, those of you who support the show, thank you. I really, really appreciate it. Really, really appreciate that you see value in what I do. Those of you who would like to support the show, YaronBrookShow.com/support, or Patreon, or Subscribestar, or Locals. Thanks, everybody. I'll see you all probably on Saturday. Thank you, guys. Bye.